Jonny Gannon today is a father and a husband, and he advises several companies that are in the national security technology and private intelligence spaces. I retired from CIA after 26 years, mainly in clandestine operations.
My guest today is Jonny Gannon, a recently retired CIA officer with more than 26 years in clandestine operations and leadership roles across some of the most complex national security environments of the last 2 decades.
I was in our training for operations at a place we call the Farm. It's an undisclosed location, but was there when 9/11 happened. A few months later, I graduated from the Farm and went into counterterrorism special operations and then shipped out on a team into Afghanistan.
Jonny went on to lead teams tasked with rebuilding morale and performance in high-stakes missions all around the world. In this conversation, we talk about espionage in the age of AI, trust and partnerships, leadership under pressure, and what it really takes to operate in the shadows.
Human intelligence right now is probably facing its greatest challenges ever because of technology. Cities that are blanketed by cameras, AI programs that can track patterns of behavior and movement.
This is a rare, thoughtful look inside a life most of us never see, and I'm excited to share it with you. And now, here's Jonny Gannon. I've got Jonny Gannon here, and I'm gonna immediately tag you in and ask you, tell us, who is Jonny Gannon?
Well, Jonny Gannon today is a father and a husband, and he advises several companies that are in the national security technology and private intelligence spaces. But going back 5 months ago, I retired from CIA after 26 years, mainly in clandestine operations.
So 5 months out of that career, how's that transition been?
I'm enjoying it. Like I loved and feel a lot of gratitude for the experiences that I was able to have in CIA and because of CIA. Traveling the world, countless adventures, meeting some of the most interesting people you can imagine in interesting environments as well. But ultimately, now I have a freedom that I didn't have before, where I can chart my own course. I can take on assignments that I like or decline assignments that I don't really want to get involved in. And that freedom didn't exist inside the CIA. So right now it's the right time for me to be living this way, I think.
Is there, one thing you hear a lot about people transitioning, certainly out of like the military, but I think any time someone leaves a career field that they've been in for so long, I see this a lot in the fire service. They never truly leave because there's so much of their identity that's been involved in that. Like that's, for a lot of them, it's half their life or more. It's where they found their spouse and when they had their family and whatnot. Have you struggled at all with that identity change, or is it just like, hey, the pros are so far outweighing the cons here?
That is a great question, and I think that is true for a lot of people. In fact, I've observed it, so it is true for a lot of people. It's not for me. I just am at a stage where I'm happy to be doing something else.
Yeah.
But I'm still traveling internationally every month, still working within the national security tech space. So it feels a little bit like a halfway house from CIA. Pays better, but I loved my time at CIA, but it was time for me to chart a little bit of a different course. So I don't have any trouble with sort of my identity now. I don't know that even when I was in CIA that my entire identity was tied to being in the U.S. government or being an operative in CIA. So
well, that's probably part of why your transition out is, as much as I can see, healthy, right? Because I think a lot of people, if all they have is work, that's all they ever aspire to and all that ever matters to them.
Right.
Leaving that can be like leaving yourself. So I imagine you made steps along the way to like have a life outside of work. I mean, you're a father, you're a husband.
Correct. And I've long been involved in things like adventure races and Spartan races, and recently got into learning mountaineering.
Okay.
So there are things that are outside that are still kind of.
Have you done any serious mountaineering yet?
Well, I did Kilimanjaro this summer.
Okay. That's serious. It's one of the tall peaks of the world.
It is. And I'm aiming to do another one in Nepal in March. So I'm slowly
There's a
getting
famous
into
one
it.
in Nepal. There's a couple famous ones in Nepal.
Is that Everest?
I think so.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do base camp and then pivot to what's called the Boucher East.
Yeah,
and summit that one. So that's the goal there. And,
so there's another area of connection. So I'm a Virginia born and raised sea level kid, right? When I was like 19, I picked up this book by Ed Viesturs, who great mountaineer, and he talks about his training for Everest and all the 14ers. And he started on Mount Rainier out in Washington, all 14,411 feet of it. So here's Virginia me, sea level me, decided at 19, I'm going to get into mountaineering. So I booked a trip out to Seattle, out to Rainier to go climb Rainier, sight unseen, did some light jogging beforehand with my brother to like kind of get ready for it, show up out there, made the summit.
That's great.
I will say forever, hardest thing I've ever physically done.
Mm-hmm.
And not that it's like pushes you to the max in any one particular exercise, but the monotony of doing switchbacks up the last half of that mountain, man, and that snow
and
with
acclimatizing and sometimes getting sick.
Yeah.
And you're always going up.
It was rough. Yeah. I remember not a lot toward the end there. I remember just being like 1 foot in front of the other, which is a great lesson in like resilience. I think that's one of the cool things about mountaineering, that and the gorgeous views being on that summit at sunrise was when we made the summit. So you got to watch the sunrise come over, Washington into Oregon. You could see all the other great mountains in that area. It was beautiful, super cool experience. I felt terrible during it because I'd got some awesome altitude sickness about halfway up the mountain. And then the whole way down, as the sun was coming up, I remember the ice starting to melt a little bit. And so even though you got the crampons on your feet, I was losing traction left and right. I fell on my butt probably 30, 40 times. And at the bottom, I was just like angry.
Yeah.
It was just like, I hated that.
That resonates. One, that's great that you did that.
It was super cool. Two, and I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, it resonates a lot because on Kilimanjaro, and for people who have done it, they know this, it's that last push. So you wake up at midnight, chow real quick, and then kit up, and then you go out and it's fucking freezing.
Yeah.
Right? Like hurts your bones. And then you just start your ascent. And it's about 8+ hours in that ascent. So you're just on a stair climber for 8.5 hours, slowly, as you said, going up. And I remember at one point there was a young woman ahead of me, a British woman named Phoebe, and she was like sniffling, and I could tell she was like really hating it. And I leaned forward and I said, I fucking hate this too. And she goes, really? And I said, yeah, every step. I hate it. Right. But it's going to be worth it in a couple hours. Yeah. As sure as shit, we got like you're talking about. So you kick off at midnight, about 6 a.m. We're somewhere. Right. And I can still look up and see we've got a lot to still do. Right. But the sky suddenly turns orange and purple. Right. And it kind of cascades across the clouds, and the clouds are way down there, and you're just moving. And then the warmth hits you from the sun. And it's incredible. And it's worth it at that point.
Yeah.
And I would say that moment was maybe even better than the actual summit. The summit was great too, but like that moment of feeling the warmth and seeing the beauty for miles of Africa, right? Yeah. Above the clouds. Incredible.
Yeah. I remember there's a lot that I remember about that. There were a couple of very technical parts of the climb. I remember we were kind of shifting along a cliff face, and this is where you had to clip into a rope, and we tightened up the rope team to do this tight maneuver around this like cliff face. And I remember seeing down thousands of feet and sort of the realization like, okay, this is not a hike. We're not just on a casual hike. There's some serious stakes here, but just the gorgeous vantage point of that was wild. Great time, great experience. And then, that 1 foot in front of the other, getting to the top of that was very satisfying. I remain incredibly proud of it. And I did it with my brother, which was another super cool thing of it.
I did it with my 20-year-old son.
I would love to go back when I'm older. My boys are able to, or my boys and now my daughter, who is 6 months old. But it'd be super cool to share that experience with them. And I remember my brother about halfway up was like really feeling rough and was like considering the walk back. And we had seen the night before the climb team go out and a couple of people do the walk back, and like you're real bummed for them. And they're very bummed that they quit. So he was talking about it, and I was like, no, man, you got to push through. Come on, we're doing great. And I was feeling great. And then the second half, he gets a second wind and is feeling great.
And you're like,
and I'm like, I think I need to quit.
Yeah.
But it was a good thing. Like, hey, we're on the same rope team. Like, I'm not going to let my brother summit and me not. And I'm sure he felt the same way.
Yeah.
So we kind of like pulled each other.
Kept you in the game.
Yeah, through to it. And the only other thing I remember that I have to just like, I always just remember looking up as we're going up those switchbacks and seeing the teams ahead of us and their lamps and like, oh, they're close. We must be close because they're close.
Mm-hmm.
2 hours later, still, you're just like, how are they not there yet?
Yeah, that was the
How are
same
we
thing at
not there
Kilimanjaro. You literally think like, okay, we're getting close.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get to a ledge and then you look up and see, oh, we're nowhere near close.
So mountaineering side, The Watchers is not necessarily a mountaineering podcast. It could be.
Well, I'll just mention real quick. One of the things that I do now is I'm an ambassador for a UK charity, and it's called the NIMSDI Foundation. And related to what we're talking about, and then we can switch back to espionage and other things, right? Cybersecurity, whatever you want to cover. But NIMSDI Foundation was founded by NIMSDI Persia, who is he was the subject of a Netflix movie called 14 Peaks. And he basically hit all of the tallest peaks in the world, the 14 tallest peaks in roughly 6 months or so, breaking the world record. And then somebody topped that record. So he goes and does it 3 times in a row. Right.
Nuts.
So he's nuts. He's an incredible climber, but my son and I climbed with him
That's
to
awesome.
do Kilimanjaro, and I'll be joining him for the as well for the Nepal trip.
The fact that anyone would do like K2 or Annapurna at all,
Yeah.
but then do it multiple times is nuts to me.
Well, he's got a movie coming out about his K2 experience. I mean, that's, what is that, like 1 in 4 people die or something like that?
And like
Technically.
Annapurna is like 1 in 3, and like, yeah, you're really playing with the odds.
Yeah.
But I would love
Let's
to
do it.
Yeah.
You in?
K2.
Yeah.
My wife is gonna nix this for sure.
Okay. Sorry to the wife.
But Everest Base Camp, I'm in. I would love to go. I just want to get eyes on it.
Yeah.
Just see that,
Just to be on that mountain.
Yeah. Just to be like on the glacier. I'm okay being down low. It would be a very cool like bucket list thing to get up on the mountain. But I don't know. Again, sea level, born and raised. There's a lot of acclimatizing that would have to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you've seen a lot of the world. You're going to go see Nepal now.
Yep.
You've been kind of all over. And let's take this back to starting into the CIA. How do you end up doing all this world travel? What kind of role did you have in the CIA that put you in all these scenarios?
Yeah. So I came across, by good fortune, a man by the name of Burton Gerber. And we are actually today on the anniversary of his passing. Burton Gerber was a legendary Russia-focused case officer and executive leader at CIA during the Cold War. He's in books, and you can easily look him up and find out about him. But my father had been a CIA analyst, and at a holiday party at my parents' house back, I think in 1999, I found myself standing next to this erudite older gentleman. I think he was in a turtleneck and tweed jacket, sort of the quintessential retired spy with a gin and tonic, probably. I don't know. I don't remember. But I found myself talking to him. It was Burton Gerber, and I was absolutely mesmerized. And I was a teacher at the time, teaching in Fairfax County, and I had lived overseas, traveled a lot overseas, and I knew something about the CIA from my dad, obviously. But when I was talking to Burton Gerber, I thought, like, if I could get like 25% of this guy's life, like that would be amazing. So like, how do I get like just 25% of that? So I asked Burton if I could take him for a coffee and just learn more about the CIA, and particularly the Director of Operations. And Burton flipped it and said, no, but I'll take you to dinner. And he gave me the name of a restaurant and the time and the location and all that. And I literally sat there going like Tuesday at 7 p.m. Like, don't fuck this up. Don't fuck this up. Like, got to be there on time. Right. And I went and had dinner with him, and, over 2.5 hours, became utterly convinced that I needed to join the Director of Operations at CIA. Like, that was the wildest adventure that somebody could have. And so I applied and I interviewed. It's a lengthy process. And I got in, and then I think some of the things that I've been dreaming about from my discussions with Burton, they didn't come to fruition, and I'm not complaining. But life went in a different trajectory, because I was in our training for operations at a place we call the Farm. It's an undisclosed location, but was there when 9/11 happened. And a few months later, I graduated from the Farm, was now certified as what we call a case officer, which is essentially an operative in human intelligence. And went into counterterrorism special operations and then shipped out on a team into Afghanistan. So I had come in dreaming of living like Burton and doing dead drops in Berlin and back
Classic
alleyways in
spy
Prague
stuff.
and things like that, in Europe, right? Classic Cold War stuff. And what I found myself in immediately was a paramilitary environment and working on counterterrorism. And counterterrorism would be the focus of the early years of my career at CIA. It would move on to other things later on, but that's sort of my entry into CIA and what it looked like.
That's a unique time to get in there. We've had a couple other people on the podcast from the CIA, several who were like there when it happened, but they were already in the CIA.
Yeah.
They were already working the other mission set, and then this happened. We also, we have people on from DHS, not DHS at the time, what became DHS, and from the FBI, we had Andrew McCabe from the FBI who was there during 9/11. They all talk about how there was a mission, then there was 9/11, and everyone became counterterrorism oriented. It just became everything.
There's a massive surge of personnel to and resources to counterterrorism.
Right. And they're training you, preparing for this. Then 9/11 happens and now it's okay. Sorry, you signed up for something kind of different, but you're an asset that we're training and you're going to go do this. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that being like a seismic shift, or was it just, hey, this is new? Okay.
And again, I was still in the training. And so they tried to augment some of the training at the very end to focus on the counterterrorism mission. But a lot of what I gained was sort of what we call OJT, right? On the job training. So I years later went back and took a hostile environment training course through CIA. And at that point, I had already experienced Afghanistan. I had been shot at one time. I had a number of experiences that were relevant to the training, and the training would have been super helpful before going.
Yeah.
But
better late than never.
We were building the airplane, in flight, right? So, and that's something that CIA does incredibly well within the U.S. government. CIA, I would say, is very, very limber, versatile, and able to adjust to national security crises rapidly.
I imagine it's a place that a lot of people who are creative thinkers and out-of-the-box thinkers are desired. I'm sure there's a lot of recruiting for that, but also a place where those people might thrive because of the mission and the resourcing. I imagine it's, hey, sometimes you're the first line into this new threat and we don't know how to deal with it. Guess who has to figure that out? You.
100%. And, if you talk about the scope of my career, so I enter my training thinking about Europe. I end up in Afghanistan. By the conclusion of my career, a couple of months ago, we're witnessing AI-driven cyber attacks.
Yeah.
We're operating in cities that are blanketed by cameras with very sophisticated security systems that have AI programs that can track patterns of behavior and movement. Telematics on telephones now become an issue. So like the threats that people are dealing with and the challenges that intelligence officers deal with overseas have completely evolved.
Yeah.
And CIA has to stay on top of that and adapt. And it does it fairly well. Obviously, I think that human intelligence right now is probably facing its greatest challenges ever because of technology.
Right. It's got like the greatest tooling ever, but it's also got the greatest noise, to sort of sort
And it has, as you pointed out, it has some of the most creative people, and it has some very aggressive people who are willing to take on these challenges and work assiduously on them. But technology is growing at a rate, evolving at a rate that I think makes it extremely difficult to do some of the things that I did when I was a baby case officer, a baby operative, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. A friendly allied government showed me in a demonstration that they could identify me leaving my apartment building based on my tattoos, right? So I could put on a ball cap, I could change my face with, whatever stuff, right? Try to alter my appearance. I could try to change my gait when I walk, but a camera, if I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt, can identify my tattoo and know it's me.
It's your walking external fingerprint.
Yeah. And then so that you also have with the AI programs that are combined with the camera systems, you have a record of my behavior, right? So if I go to work, generally along this route, if I go visit friends, sometimes in this district, sometimes I go to this bookstore over here, The minute I deviate from those patterns, a red flag goes up in the system. It's automatic, and it requires human eyes to come take a look at what is Jonny doing, right? So when I was a junior operative, I don't recall that we even had to worry about phones, right? When I was, 20 plus years ago, and then eventually we got flip phones, and then eventually you start actually thinking about like, what kind of digital dust am I leaving as I'm moving around and doing things, right? And then you fast forward to the present era, and I mean, it's really daunting. These are really tough challenges that operatives have to face in trying to conduct truly clandestine operations.
Yeah, first of all, I'm laughing internally about the idea of you imagining yourself this like urban spy, like in Berlin, like world-class city. And
are you saying I don't look urban enough? Is that like
no,
Andy?
No.
I mean,
I'm saying like you're imagining like this.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're thinking of yourself in like a tweed jacket and all that sort of stuff too. Like I'm going to be, this European.
I'm going to be
spy.
an adult, and I'm going to be sophisticated.
And then where you end up is mountain villages of Afghanistan, which I can't imagine is any further from the idea of like, the post-Soviet era East Europe, right? So first, I think that's a funny, ironic, not funny, an ironic sort of thing.
I get what you're saying.
On the technology thing, I mean, we had Jack Resider on the podcast, and he's a big podcaster in the cybersecurity space, but he's well known for his work on privacy, his own personal privacy. He's an advocate for privacy and tries very hard to protect his identity, enough so he came on the podcast remotely on video, which he obscured with like this video mask. So he doesn't show his face. He does public appearances wearing just a mask. He talks about all the effort he goes to not use like a phone that ties back to him in any way. And I still even think for him, like, it's hopeless, man. Like, you don't have to look far to find a photo of him. They're out there.
Yeah.
And as much as you try, like, yeah, there's cameras everywhere. Once I figure out who you are once, now I can put the whole trail together. And with AI, seems to be the best or the most powerful tool for large data analysis that we're ever going to have so far. You're just a large producer of data, and we're collecting more and more of it now than we ever have. All we got to do is slap an AI to be like, yeah, let's just look at this massive data set, and you tell me when people are acting weird. Mm-hmm. And it'll say, thumbs up, boss. I'll let you know when people are acting weird. Stark.
And it's automated.
Exactly.
Which is, let's talk about that for a second. I think we've reached an era already where I think you can foresee that switching from operations to analysis, that analysts could end up being people within the intelligence community who are either like supervising or monitoring AI agents.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then tasking them to synthesize information, to cull through data, to produce even analytic conclusions, right? That they will then themselves review and potentially adjust or alter, right? But you're actually talking about managing AI agents, right? And then when you're talking about from the operational perspective, it's AI agents and programs that are monitoring individuals overseas.
Yeah, it's going to be game-changing potentially if it's not already. We had Jennifer Eubank on the podcast who
she's a good friend.
Yeah, and she was awesome. And some of what we talked about was her time toward the end of her career in the CIA leading that charge.
Digital innovation. Yep.
Exactly, looking at digital innovation. And I can't remember the exact quote, but she kind of said, like, if anyone's at the forefront of AI in the government, it's the CIA.
Yeah.
Like, we're the leading, which makes a ton of sense. Well, we're going to get into a broader topic here in a second, but you want the CIA to be at the forefront, at least globally. I'd rather our intelligence apparatus be at the forefront. It would be a tremendous sleeping at the wheel if they weren't, because of the power that these tools have.
I agree. And Jennifer was a driver of a lot of that. However, maybe she discussed this. I watched part of her episode with you guys to prepare. It was my homework. But, you're still dealing with a bureaucracy, right? A sizable bureaucracy, and trying to move things through that bureaucracy can be very difficult. Somebody like Jennifer is very talented, an incredible leader, and she was able to make great strides, I think. And there are others inside CIA today that are doing the same thing, but you're still trying to keep pace with what's happening in the private sector. And I think if you talk about like By contrast, the Manhattan Project, right, where the U.S. government pulls together all of the top scientists, some of them even international,
Yep.
corrals them in one location and has them work on one technological advancement. In this case, the U.S. government doesn't have a Manhattan Project. It's the private sector.
Yeah.
So companies are driving forward and even engaging in foreign relationships, partnerships, right? And the U.S. government is trying to keep track of all that. And in some ways, it's coming from behind. I would say that the CIA is out ahead, comparatively speaking, within the U.S. government, but there's still tremendous challenges with keeping up with the pace of developments with regard to AI right now. My first exposure to it was in 2020, if I recall correctly. And somebody was going to like a symposium on AI, and I thought to myself, like, what the hell is that? Right? And then she came back and she briefed some things, and then she showed a demo of how you can literally, instead of going manually and looking through a lot of documents, the AI program can just cull through thousands and thousands and thousands of foreign language documents, find something for you, all this, right? And then, give you the information that you need, that you've asked for. And I thought, holy shit, like it's
a game changer.
Yeah, that is a massive game changer.
Yeah, and it's still very much in its infancy, right? And just like go 2022 today, which is technically 2026, but really end of 2025.
I mean, we're just getting started. Yeah,
big 5-year span, and the difference between the first thing I saw and what I saw this past week, one of the projects I'm working on where I'm using the AI tool, its capabilities gotten so far from where it started, but it's still infant,
Yeah.
And it's one of those where the sky feels the limit. I talk about this a lot on the podcast where I'm up and down with AI. Like some days I'm like, this is, it's game changing. Like it's going to be a different world. Some days I'm a little more down on it because sometimes it'll spit out something stupid at me. I'm like, okay, you clearly have some work to do. You're not there yet, but I tend toward the hype. Like, okay, this is real. This is powerful stuff. We are in that fourth industrial revolution. Like there is going to be a post AI world or post,
Yeah, I agree with you.
Maybe singularities.
There's a guy named Anthony Binci who came out of NGA and CIA before that and just wrote a book called The Fourth Intelligence Revolution. So it's not just an industrial revolution, it's an intelligence revolution too. Like getting back to our topic, the way that we collect information, the way we synthesize and analyze information, and the way we try to mitigate counterintelligence threats, all of that has changed from the time that I went through the farm. Right? And it's accelerated in recent years, I think, and I would assume it's going to continue accelerating, and it's going to be very, very challenging for the U.S. intelligence community to stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
The best thing I think it could do, which it's doing, is really engage in critical partnerships and strategic partnerships and just try to stay with it.
I certainly think it's going to accelerate. I think it's going to follow something. There's that law around like CPUs, which is like they get progressively more powerful. It's almost like a compounding effect. And if you look at like the first airplane to the trail to get on the moon, like every decade just got like tighter and tighter time span to achieve more and more.
Yeah.
I think AI, like that's in the model.
Yeah.
In the model is it's going to get progressively better at progressing itself. And there should be a moment, a lot of the big AI talking heads talk about this, like their goal is literally to get the AI to the point where it's going to be able to create itself better than the humans who have started it. And they're cool. Now, you know more than we do. Make yourself better on these sort of like parameters.
Yeah.
Which is both a terrifying moment, but also
it's intriguing and terrifying.
Right. Because all of a sudden now, if you say like you have all the power that you have access to make yourself even more powerful, we're getting into that, we're getting to that 1960s, 70s original sci-fi of this world of robots and AIs, and you can get into all the dystopian culture around, well, if the robots take over and the Terminators and all that sort of stuff. But then you also get this like utopian sort of view of look what it can enable, what it can do in medicine, how it can help the battle against things like cancer.
There's tremendous positive outcomes that we're looking at. But I think you got on the one hand, like in one bin, when you talk about future warfare, the potential for automated systems to be battling automated systems, right? I think we're on the cusp
Your
of that.
drones are fighting
We're on that
theirs.
now, right? Or we're on the cusp of that now. We're not fully in that space yet, right? But we're on the cusp of that, right? But then I think we're also entering an era where data collection which is a form of intelligence collection, like has probably never touched the average citizen more than it does now, right? Like virtually every single human being who has an online presence, whether they realize it or not, is probably subject to having their data compromised on some level. Passwords, emails, Facebook accounts, medical data, unfortunately, in some cases. But there's so many data breaches, and there's that what we call the data lake, right? And it impacts average citizens now, right? So intelligence services are sucking up large amounts of data, right? But individual citizens, I think, are probably, I mean, you would know better. This is your space, right? But probably not fully aware that their data is being collected by governments, by bad actors, by AI programs. Like, I mean, it's
And if they do know, if they have some inkling, a lot of them are apathetic about it. It's like,
it's everybody.
I get
what
that.
Can I do?
Exactly. And a lot of them take the attitude of like, listen, I got nothing to hide. If you want to read my emails, read my emails. And I get that attitude. I'm a cybersecurity professional. Like, this is what I do. And even I'm a little flippant where I'm like, the convenience of just signing into this service with my Google account, it's pretty convenient. The fact that Google knows everything that I'm using and knows the route I walked from here to my parking, garage, my cars and all that.
But that's
all there.
The fundamental challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
That convenience usually wins.
That is the human condition.
Getting me to memorize like a 15 character, password and changing it every 2 months. Like that's a pain in the ass.
Right. And,
and then I fucking forget. And then I locked out of my bank account and it's convenience generally wins.
And sometimes it can be more secure, but all to say, it's more challenging than ever to be a citizen. It's more challenging than ever to care about privacy, and it's more challenging than ever to be in the intelligence apparatus collecting that data. But like I said, I think you also have with that the most powerful tool you've ever had, at least on the cusp of being the most powerful tool you've ever had to deal in all that. So I think the intelligence capability is going to be vastly improved potentially by all this, if they can, get that signal to noise ratio pretty solid.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge there, speaking of the obvious, is that you've got large amounts of data, right? And the intelligence services that are able to collect the data, synthesize, analyze, right, more effectively and faster have tremendous advantage.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the farm.
Yes.
There's a lot of CIA in popular media. There's a lot of movies. I think there's even a movie called The Farm.
Never saw it, but okay.
And there's Jason Bourne movies and all that sort of stuff. This may be a very broad question. Yeah. And it's probably one that you get often.
You want to know what
do they get?
What the popular culture gets wrong and what the popular gets right?
What do they get wrong? Exactly. Yeah. You got it.
I think what the popular culture and media, including Hollywood, tends to get wrong, or not wrong, but maybe just not fully understand, is that the Jason Bourne model, while attractive and in some ways mirroring, I think, American ideology, because by the way, James Bond is fully a member of Her Majesty's government at the time. Her Majesty's, now it's His Majesty's, right? But fully a member of the British government. Jason Bourne is fighting the U.S. government and the CIA. And that's a very American thing.
Yeah.
Right? But the whole idea of the lone wolf,
super soldier.
Yeah, it's not true. Right? Navy SEALs operate in a team. Human intelligence operatives, right? They are still tied to a framework, to a team. And I think what often the popular culture probably doesn't understand is that a lot of our success comes through partnerships, friendships, right? Like when you talk about like what the taxpayer or what the president in particular gets from the CIA, a big piece of it is that you have human beings from the director of operations who are the connection to hundreds of security services around the world, right? And you get that.
Yeah.
I don't know that's not something that people write books about or talk about in movies, right? Or display in movies. But that's a tremendous advantage, right? And by maintaining those partnerships with allies and with their security services It's just force multiplier after force multiplier after force multiplier. So the idea that I go out, in a trench coat with a fedora hat and I sneak around and I do everything by myself without partners within CIA or across the IC or without sometimes foreign partners who are helping facilitate operations. It's not true. Right? And maybe that's too complex for the movie.
Hard to get
industry.
This subtle dynamics.
Yeah. I think one author who tends to get it very close to the mark is a guy named David Ignatius, who's a best-selling author on espionage with themes. And I think he gets it pretty close. And he incorporates connections to foreign partners in his novels. And that's a big piece of it.
And you're right to think, I think that the public kind of doesn't put a lot of stock into that. I think it's become more of a topic lately in the current political space, and not to get too into the political lines here, but you have an administration that's arguably more antagonistic to partners than ever before. And soft power, American soft power, is a big topic of conversation of whether or not that's increasing or decreasing by the current actions and whether our current executive strategy cares about that or not. Good for people to understand, like, well, hey, you want an effective CIA, and we'll get into why.
Yeah.
If one of the big tools an operative tells you is our partnerships and our foreign allies and the fact that we make friends and we don't antagonize, maybe you don't want that to change. Maybe you want to continue to have partners and rely on that because that's where things are getting done.
I think that it creates a serious dilemma that may be useful for your listeners and watchers to absorb. I don't know that the average citizen understands this dilemma. And that is that, let's say you are a foreign security service, I'm the CIA, you and I develop a partnership, even a friendship, and we are operating against some terrorists, right? Or some malign actors, right? Who are a threat to both of our countries. And another U.S. agency engages in an operation in order to steal information in your country. And maybe it's against some malign actors, right? If you come across that operation, that can do great damage to our relationship and our productivity, right? And I think most of us would like to believe that there is a council back in Washington, D.C. of wise elders with long gray beards or gray hair and buns, and that they are deciding what value weights to put on each activity within these bilateral relationships. Sometimes it's the case, and if the issues are elevated high enough, but sometimes it's not. And sometimes the U.S. government can act in a manner that is unintentionally discombobulated, and there's a real dilemma sometimes in making a decision on what we do collaboratively and what we do unilaterally. And there's a necessary tension between those two things. But that's the very definition of risk management too, right? And I served several times as a chief of station overseas, and you are often stuck with those decisions, and you have to own them, right? Do we proceed to do something just as the U.S. government without any help and at risk of potentially damaging some relationships, but we decide that it's necessary to act? The bin Laden raid is one example, right? Although I'm not sure that we were in a very tight collaborative relationship with the Pakistanis, right? But if you can imagine that kind of scenario where you have to make a decision, do we do this thing by ourselves because we have to, or do we pause and not do it because it could do massive damage? And those are tough decisions.
Right. As I understand the calculus there was, hey, we could let them know.
They might warn,
but we don't. Right. There's not a full trust there. And then, interesting. And I want to talk about that if we can talk about that. But first, let's pull this thing back. Yeah. Generally, in the current American politic, there's skepticism about big institutions. You have all that popular media that paints the CIA a certain way and the intelligence apparatus a certain way. Let's talk about what is the CIA's mission, and then maybe if you could give us some color of why do we want a CIA staffed by people like you putting a career into pushing that mission forward?
Yeah. So let me be clear for the purpose of this engagement. I'm not speaking for the CIA.
Sure.
I am not speaking for the U.S. government, for this administration, prior administrations, whatever. I'm giving you my perceptions, my conclusions based on my experience, 26 years at CIA. The way I would frame what the CIA does is it is an organization that produces effects. Okay, and that stands in contrast to some other U.S. agencies, right? What the CIA does is it produces effects for the policymakers in the United States. And those effects can be, dropping a Hellfire missile on something, right, and blowing it up in order to remove somebody from the battlefield. It can be going and stealing information that we need in order for policymakers to make a better decision or more informed decision about something. It can involve working in concert with allies to affect a particular outcome. It can involve producing top-tier analysis that then is used to inform decisions. Development of technology, the use of technology. But these are effects, right? So what U.S. presidents and other policymakers do is they will sometimes lean on the CIA to create effects, to try to solve problems or address certain things or try to create information advantage or persuade partners to do certain things in collaboration with us, with the United States government, right? So the CIA produces those things, right? So it's not just an institution that studies geography and world problems. It is a much more
not just the intelligence piece.
Yeah, it is an active organization that produces effects for U.S. policymakers. And as history shows, sometimes those effects come to good for the United States, and sometimes they go sideways, right? But you can never predict fully how things are going to play out, right? But U.S. policymakers lean on the CIA to often do things, right? And I keep underscoring that or foot stomping that, produce effects for the U.S. government. It's not just studying. Analysis is a huge part of what CIA does, but it's not just studying world problems. It's actively engaging with them.
Well, and as I understand, sometimes it's the first effect maker, right? If we look at Afghanistan, maybe an area that people don't necessarily know about how we first made our moves into Afghanistan post 9/11. Maybe I'll let you tell the story, but as I understand it, we fairly quickly put boots on the ground to make inroads with the Northern Alliance with our eventual goal of, hey, we're gonna come in and clear house.
Correct.
We're gonna find this guy and this organization and we're going to eliminate them. As I understand, those guys don't get boots on the ground without the CIA getting the information, on the ground information, which I'm sure means CIA boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm. All that's correct. And that's a very good example of effects, right, that the Bush administration needed at that time, right? And that was done also, though, you mentioned the Northern Alliance. So again, unlike Jason Bourne, like that was done through relationships, teaming up with people on the ground, much like the Army Special Forces does, right?
Yeah, which is a thing I learned late in life. You have this idea of special forces, and you're just imagining the tier 1 door kickers, like, oh, these are, the guys that do the hostage rescues and whatnot. I didn't find out till later, special forces missions largely force multiplication. It's on the ground, make friends, make allies, raise them up, and be advisors to potentially companies of, green forces, I guess is kind of the term, of friendly forces that are going to take action. We're going to force multiply them.
Right.
I didn't know that.
But I would argue CIA is very similar.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a force multiplication component. That's one of the effects from CIA. Espionage is another one. Right. And I go back to what I said, that there's a dilemma sometimes or a tension between conducting espionage and working in partnerships. And that has to be managed by the people who do the work. I come to think of it. You had asked me a question earlier, not to distract from the current thread that we're on.
It's okay.
But you'd asked me what popular culture gets right and what it gets wrong. I think that there is, like if you look at Homeland and some other shows or movies, I think that there is, when you are living a clandestine life, I think that there are stressors and there are complications right? And there are things that can be sometimes even corrupting for a person
Oh, I'm sure.
that an individual has to deal with, right? And I think Hollywood probably makes it a little bit more extreme, right? Like I don't think we have a bunch of pill popping people uh, in the director of operations. Generally, fairly healthy workforce, right?
Still well-adjusted human
But yeah,
beings.
but it is not an everyday line of work, and it does have stressors and complications that can be very, very tough for people to contend with over a period of time.
Yeah.
And I think that they generally literature and media gets that part right.
Yeah, I've sat across from several, so many people from all these big institutions, and I've had the opportunity to meet lots of people who have had careers like yours, who the outside perspective, the layman perspective, you think of as almost like different type of people, and you talk to them like, hey, their parents, their spouses, their sons and daughters of real human beings, real citizens. They have lives outside of their work. They're not always in a building in Langley, and that's like all they do. And that's all they ever think about. They're human beings, just like you, just like everyone else.
They are, and that's something that I think that sometimes the popular culture gets wrong, right? I think a better example, although I'm sure there will be some people who would criticize this, for me would be like Don Corleone, right? As opposed to James Bond. James Bond doesn't have children. Like he doesn't have
Yeah.
a life that he has to balance against this intense mission, right? Don Corleone has children, he has grandchildren, he has a wife, he has things that he has to balance. Now, somebody who's watching or listening will point out, well, that guy's a criminal, and at least James Bond is a good guy, quote unquote. But I'm showing that like the lifestyle that he has to lead and that he has to contend with, I think is probably a better example of what some people have to deal with in the intelligence world. You had asked me too about like the structure of the CIA. 5 directorates.
Okay.
Director of operations that I grew up in is one. That is your overseas operations fundamentally. Clandestine world, all of that. Director of analysis, which is those are the people producing the analysis that goes to policymakers, experts in particular regions, countries, fields. Science and technology, so your R&D, your technology development, technology that sometimes facilitates operations in the DO. Director of support, which again facilitates all that we do. And those are some of the real unsung heroes at CIA. And then you get to digital innovation, and you've already talked to Jennifer Eubank about that. So you've got that. So that's the institution itself. And again, I grew up in the director of operations, although when I became a senior executive at CIA, I had analysts working for me and science and technology people and open source and all of that.
Well, one of the directorates, the director of support. You mentioned unsung heroes, and I always think of like the logistics people that make sure.
Yeah.
One of the great lessons of the American military might and why we have so much power is because we have phenomenal boots that we can put on the ground, but it's because we can put the boots on the ground.
Yes.
Like we can get the material and the personnel and the food and the energy and the communications and all the infrastructure to support that because there's so many people involved. Like there's a reason we call it the tip of the spear, because so much of the spear is not the tip.
Yeah.
Right? It's a much larger overall apparatus, and they don't always get their limelight. They kind of work in the shadows, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't get all the excitement and the cool stories that you might get in the director of operations. But
they make it all happen. And I'll tell you a good vignette from my early days in Afghanistan. And I was on a team that had a special forces detailee on it in Afghanistan. And one time we were sitting around in the evening and we were chatting, and he says to me, he goes, the thing about CIA and then DOD before it became the Department of War, he said the difference between CIA and DOD, because when there's like a world crisis at the Pentagon, we engage in back planning and then forward planning and then side planning, and then we review our planning, and then we move logistical pieces, air assets, ships, all the stuff we need. And meanwhile, at CIA, you have like 5 guys who meet in a room and they grab a couple of briefcases full of money and weapons. Maybe the magazines match the weapons, maybe they don't. Who knows? You just throw stuff in backpacks and you get on a plane. You fly right into the crisis zone, right? And you're there.
Yeah.
Right. And he goes, the difference continues to, or he's continuing the vignette. He says, at DOD, once we actually land and we're on the ground, like we're there to stay. You guys get there and you're like, well, holy shit, how do we get out of here? Or what do we do next? Right?
Where's our exit route?
Yeah. But anyway, humor aside, from that vignette, it's the directive support people that make that stuff happen. They get you on airplanes. They get you money. They move resources, and rapidly and responsibly, I might add. Right? Yeah. All of this is within U.S. law, right? But they do stuff rapidly in a way that the other bureaucracies in the U.S. government really can't.
Yeah, outside of my cybersecurity world, I'm a paramedic, and I've been for almost 2 decades now. And then we have our own unsung heroes in like the dispatch and all the back office and all the administration. It's great to be in a position where you can get on location to provide help to somebody who needs it. But there's so much that happened for the fact that when they called, telecommunications were routed appropriately. Someone answered it. Someone determined where they are, gave us the GPS, sent it to our unit, called us on the radio to identify that, send us on our way. So much happens there. And you have these people who, again, they're not that there's glory in all these different things, but people clap for first responders, right? When you say I'm a paramedic or firefighter or whatever else, dispatchers don't get their limelight. That whole administrative support apparatus.
But to your vignette there, the dispatcher doesn't do their job correctly. You don't wind up on the correct site.
No, you
saving the person's life.
You end up on the wrong side of the river sometimes. You're like,
same thing in CIA. The director of support makes those things happen. They actually help produce some of those effects that we have.
So shout out to the people in support roles, making sure
big time
that the boots on the ground of whatever career field get where they need to be with the resourcing to do what they do.
Yep. And that's the key thing, right? That's you'd asked that question about what the popular culture gets right and wrong. The movies don't show those people.
Right.
Right. It's Jason Bourne. It's James Bond, and they do it all by themselves. No way.
No, one side comment on the Jason Bourne thing. If we had to have our own American James Bond, why did we do JB again? We can't,
So there is, getting back to you mentioned like a distrust of government, I think, earlier in our discussion, right? Jason Bourne exemplifies that.
Yeah.
Right?
That is the story.
The government becomes twisted. The CIA becomes evil in those books and movies, and Jason Bourne has to fight against it.
Yeah.
And that's a common theme throughout American literature and just culture.
That is a very
not fully
interesting
trusting
point.
the government, whereas in the British context, James Bond is fully part of the government.
Right. Yeah, and there's no, I don't think there any 007 storyline that I'm aware of. There's never like the government can't be trusted. And sometimes he clashes with, his team and whatnot, but it's sort of like assumed we're the good guys. And from the Queen on down, it's all good. Our story is can't trust. They're trying to get this guy who's the hero of the story. It's very interesting.
I mean, we're a country founded, and you don't need me to tell you this, and your listeners already know it, right? But we're a country founded on very rugged pseudo-individualism.
Yeah.
Right? I don't believe anybody's really truly autonomous, right? But we have that as part of our culture. And so there is a distrust of government. And then so when you get to the CIA, which you'd also asked about, like how that fits in the context of our culture and why we need a CIA, right? The bottom line is like there are people who are trying to harm us. There are people who are trying to undermine us. There are people who are just simply competing with us. Yeah. And if you want the United States to maintain advantage, it has to have a capacity and capability to collect information and, as I said before, produce effects that give the United States advantage.
Yeah.
Right. It cannot be passive.
Yeah.
And it cannot always be reactive. Right. It has to have a proactive element, which is what the CIA is. But where it comes into conflict with, I think, potentially with American values sometimes, is that Americans like to think of themselves as straight shooters. Right. I say what I mean.
Sure.
You can trust me. Right. And yet we have an institution whose mission it is to sometimes deceive, sometimes steal things, sometimes blow things up, right? And carry out various other functions on behalf of the American people and the U.S. government. that are designed to save American lives and protect Americans, but the actual activity seems to be on its face in conflict
Yeah,
with what we say are our
course.
predominant values, right? And so there are people who I think dislike the idea of a CIA, and I understand them. I get it. As an American, right? Like I get it. But I would argue that a republic can't really survive without having some capability to produce effects internationally in order to maintain advantage and to protect Americans.
Yeah, to get to the highest sort of level here, there's what people call American hegemony, right? Where it's American influence over the world and the direction of the world writ large. You want a CIA because you want America to stay in that position, if you're rational. And you want America in that position because you don't want anyone else who's vying for that position to have that position. You, as my opinion, I don't want a world where China's motivations are what drive world forces, and China's vision of managing the people of the world or governing is what prevails. I want ours. I don't think we're perfect. And I don't like all the things that the intelligence apparatus and the CIA and the NSA and all these others have done and have to do. But there is no perfect world. There's the real world that we live in. Most of the people that I meet, and I say this all the time as a point on the podcast, like most people who sit across from me who have had these careers in these easy to be skeptical and easy to criticize type of roles, they're properly motivated people. They do care about their work. They care about the mission. They care about the country. They care about you, the citizens. Do they make mistakes? Absolutely. But I've never had one of them say anything other than that. Like, yeah, we're human. We make mistakes. But you want people who are motivated by the right things in those positions. And I think that's a big problem that people have excess skepticism about. Right.
Yeah. But I think all of that resonates, Andy. But I would say it's also understandable that some people would feel concerned that there are people using their tax dollars to go sneak around in other countries and do things that that they may not fully agree with or not fully understand, right?
Yeah, there's some people with the attitude of like, that's not our business.
Yeah, there's an entity in the U.S. government that does things that I don't have any insight into, and I don't have any idea, like if those people are accountable or I may not agree with if I were to know with what they're doing, but I don't even know what they're doing, right? So I can understand on the part of the American public, some segments of the public having concerns about that. What I would offer is that we have congressional oversight for a reason. And that is something that I took very seriously when I became an executive level officer at CIA. I was communicating clearly with congressional oversight and developed some very positive relationships with staffers and members of the oversight committees and had to testify like this with a microphone.
I think I'm probably more friendly than some of the people you had to testify to.
That's true. Although there were some very wonderful members and staff members that I dealt with in the latter part of my career, and also, maintained relationships with members on the National Security Council, and took that very, very seriously, right? Because there needs to be, when you're engaged in secret activity, and I'm sure there are some colleagues at CIA right now who say like, "Shut up, Johnny," like whatever. There needs to be oversight. There needs to be scrutiny of the operational activities that we're engaging in overseas, and we need to be reporting to other entities what we're doing, and then taking that feedback, which can be negative, right, and can be tough. Taking on those tough questions from members of Congress, I think it's essential for a healthy intelligence organization.
And it's a great feature of the American project that it all goes back to civilian elected control. Obviously, there's conspiracy theories around things, but we recently had General Petraeus on the podcast, and we talked about history a bit. We talked about military history. We talked about the revolution in Washington a little bit. And one of the things that General Petraeus was talking about is Washington was not like a great tactical mind. Like he actually kind of got his butt whooped for the early part of the revolution.
Sure did.
But
French Indian War and
Well, in the early part of the revolution, like we lost New York and they just got kind of forced across the river, from New Jersey. But one of the things that he did phenomenally was he managed Congress, and he never tried to overpower Congress. He always kept himself in the position of, I report to them.
Yeah.
When he very easily could have just said like, no, now I'm supreme commander of everything and I'm going to be the monarch. Sort of set us on the right path there.
Yeah.
And that's ever since been a feature of our democracy, is organizations like the CIA, the DoD or DOW at its, large point, it still reports to elected civilians at the end of the day.
Correct.
Which is a great feature.
Yep.
One that we want to preserve.
I think it is absolutely, it's a great feature. And there's, I think, a natural human tendency, like none of us like having our homework checked.
Of course.
Right? None of us like going and having somebody scrutinize the activity that we're involved in. And I think there could be, I've seen some colleagues err in this where they take a bit of a Jack Nicholson, a few good men approach, like,
you want me on that ball.
Yeah. Like I'm the guy I eat breakfast 300 yards from Cubans who are trained to kill me.
Yeah.
And I don't know who you are to question me, kind of thing. Right. But I go back to what I said earlier, which is I think that component of the U.S. government is essential, and it should give some comfort, even though there's going to be people out there who disagree with even the very existence of a CIA. It should give some comfort that there is oversight, that there are people who review all of the operations, in particular covert operations, not all of the operations, but covert action in particular is reviewed by Congress, and we take feedback.
That's that reference. That movie is a great one. It's a great movie. It's a great scene.
Yeah.
But it's one I think some people have misunderstood. Like the whole thesis of that thing is that Jack Nicholson's character is clearly in the wrong. He's delusional.
Yeah.
And people,
but that sentiment of, I would rather you just say thank you and go underway. Like that is, some people when they're dealing with Congress and when they're dealing with the White House or other U.S. agencies, that's a natural human reaction.
Right.
Like, shut up. I'm the one in the field taking the risks.
You sleep under the blanket of the freedom I provide.
Yeah.
And you have the nerve to ask me, or to question how I provide it.
And I generally checked myself against that once I got into executive positions at CIA. And a lot of my colleagues did too, right? They take that very seriously.
Well, let's go back to your early CIA career. You mentioned Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Tell me about your first as much as you can, right? Tell me about your first activity into Afghanistan.
My first activity?
I'm using that term. I don't know if that's what you call it.
Yeah.
You leave the farm.
Yeah.
It's post 9/11.
Yep.
You go to the Directorate of Operations.
Yep.
Then what happens?
I was placed in our counterterrorism center in a specific component called Special Operations. It was CTC/SO under a gentleman by the name of Hank Crumpton. And that was the entity within CIA that was supporting the early war effort, the teams that were going into Afghanistan. And it was very much, as I reflect back, a sort of rebirth of the OSS, because I sat at a desk answering phones for teams downrange. We worked 12-hour shifts, and you had people in there 24/7. Support officers, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, experienced CIA operatives, analysts, all in that component supporting the war effort. And so you saw this sort of rebirth of all of the clandestine elements of the U.S. government pulled back together again in order to produce this effect, getting into Afghanistan, destroying al-Qaeda and the Taliban. So I actually flew in a small aircraft in my first entry in Afghanistan alongside members of SEAL Team 6, and got off the plane and went to our compound in Kabul, and then shipped off near to the border of Iran in an area called Herat. And that was where I started my career, right there in Herat. And I spent about a year and a half in Afghanistan, all told. It was a fascinating experience, working with the Afghans, for one. Some of the most beautiful, rugged scenery you can imagine. And just the kind of people that I was exposed to, like in that early phase, I think I'm referred earlier to getting shot at, and I think my life and career is probably not as dramatic as some people you will encounter right coming out of CIA. But I was attached to when I was in Herat, attached briefly to a British special boat service team. Those are British SEALs, and we rode into the mountains for several days in order to meet with village chiefs and commanders and establish relationships. And when we were driving back to our bases in Herat, I was driving, an SBS commander was next to me, and there were two operators in the back seat. And as I was driving the lead vehicle, and we were like three vehicles, I suddenly noticed there was a huge ditch dug in the road, and the road broke off on the side, so it was hard to go around. So we had to stop, and I stopped, and my window was down, and immediately I heard the crack and the whoosh as bullets were clearly going by my head. And despite my training previously in the military and then also at CIA, it came to naught. I just actually turned and I stared at where the shots were coming from. And the SBS commander, a little bit more familiar with combat, actually leaned over compassionately, squeezed my shoulder, and he said, "Jono, we've got to get off the X, man. Drive, man." So I quickly kicked things into gear and drove around the ditch. And that was my one experience getting shot at. And fortunately, it didn't result in any greater violence. But there was also, in that moment, a good lesson about discipline, because the other vehicles fanned out and they set up in positions where they could see where the shooting was coming from. And I remember distinctly hearing on the radio one of the operators requesting permission to fire to take out the shooters that were on a rooftop. And the commander had the wherewithal to say, "We don't know who they are, so go ahead and make sure that they see your weapons." Right. And then at that point, he also directed me, and we drove around a berm and became visible again and put our weapons out the window. And the Afghans who were shooting immediately dropped their weapons and put their hands up.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think what it turned out to be is they were likely trying to shoot our vehicles and stop us and then rob us. Perhaps thinking we were NGO workers, or who knows? Ultimately, I'll never know. Right. But once they saw weapons,
saw the greater firepower.
From multiple positions, they put their weapons down and fell back. So nobody was killed. And I think that speaks to the discipline and the discernment of the SBS commander. So that was one experience. I engaged in much of the focus there was on counterterrorism. So one operation that I can mention is I'd befriended a number of Talibs. And the ultimate goal was to lure a Taliban commander from Pakistan over into Afghanistan. And took me months they actually had come to me and they wanted to negotiate passage for that commander into Afghanistan to visit his family. He had family on both sides of the Durand line. And so I told him that, sure, we can negotiate passage. And ultimately, though, it was deceptive, because that commander on the other side of the border had engaged in operations that had wounded and I think even killed U.S. service personnel. So we knew from CIA that if he ever comes across the border, he's going to be captured, right? But I had to, and this is human operations, right? I had to feign friendship and actually, to be quite frank, these were just kind of like country bumpkins, right? But I just had to sit with them and have tea repeatedly and negotiate with them and essentially befriend them, and then convince them that the commander could come over and he could meet with me, and then he and I would negotiate what it would look like for him to go back and forth to visit his family on the other side of the border. He ultimately came over the border and he was captured. But a bit of a harrowing moment, because we had a paramilitary team that was waiting for him when we got word he was coming across, and I went to meet the vehicle when he came across the border from Pakistan. And He had about 5 guys in his truck, and they got out and they put a gun in my rib and said, "You need to ride with us." And of course, I was unarmed, right? And so I think I had a choice where I could have declined to get in the vehicle, and they might have shot me, or they might have just let me go. But they certainly would have turned around and gone back. But it was a decision I had to make, and so I got in the vehicle, and we rode to the meeting site. Got out, and I won't get into any more detail, but the paramilitary team from CIA was positioned and ready and hidden. They were concealed. And at the right moment, I dove out of the meeting location, and they came crashing in and grabbed him, and he was captured and I think taken off to Guantanamo Bay. But so that was kind of like the beginning of my career, right? It wasn't all that exciting, but it was quite extraordinary experience to live and work in Afghanistan in the early days. And some of the Afghans that we worked with were absolutely incredible.
Do you remember there being a moment on the other side of like that experience, connecting back to like that first conversation you had with, like, I can't remember the gentleman's name that you talked about in the tweed jacket, right? But
yeah, Burton Gerber.
Yeah. Is there ever like a moment that you can remember thinking back or like being in that moment? And I just imagine it being kind of surreal to be like, oh wait, I'm actually a CIA operative on the ground and I'm in real danger.
Yeah. I think when I look back now, it feels more surreal than it did in that particular moment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Like another example, when I mentioned being with the Special Boat Service team, and when we came to one area, they received word from Bagram Air Base that they could not proceed any further to go meet with a particular commander in a village because there was a U.S. Navy SEAL team that was in the general vicinity, and they wanted to avoid any potential complications or clashes, green on green, as they would call it. And so the commander looked at me and he said, "So we can't go into the village to meet with the commander." The implication was I could go.
Yeah.
Because CIA didn't follow.
Because you're not, right. You don't have the same rules.
And so I did. So I drove the vehicle alone with an interpreter into the village. And I remember as I was driving to the village, just seeing people staring over the walls, like at their home, and people turning and looking at me as we drove in. And ultimately, I did the meeting with the commander. And then the Special Boat Service team set up like on the ridge line, and they were there for quick response if I got into any kind of trouble. But let's be real. The amount of time it would take them to get into the village and get me would have.
The bad things that could have happened to you would have happened to you.
So I think when I look back now as a father with a lot more that's at risk, and I think about the things that I did as a very young operative in Afghanistan, some of it might have been for the good, but some of it was just, it seems surreal now to look back and think I really did that. Like, what was my decision-making calculus like in that moment, right? Yeah. But I think at the time I was just, it was almost like a Zen experience. Like 9/11 had happened. I wanted to be in the fight. I wanted to be there. I wanted to get myself into Afghanistan. In fact, CIA had originally proposed that I go to Pakistan. I said, no, I want to be in Afghanistan. Like I want to be where the fight is taking place. And I desperately wanted to get into that and be part of our response from the United States. And I think like I was living the moments, just living the moments there during those first couple of years of my career, completely passionate about the mission, completely passionate about what we were doing. And I don't know that I reflected as much until later, right? It's probably common for many adults.
I imagine, so the Zen thing, resonates with me. So not to compare the work of a paramedic to this, but there's a similar thing because you go through so much schooling and training and you talk through all these scenarios and you practice in class, you practice on each other, you go do clinicals where you're in a setting with, a physician who can kind of oversee you as you're learning to do things like intubate and all those sort of things. But then there's actually out there doing. And when you're in the real thick of it, you're working like a crazy trauma, right? And there's 3 helicopters coming in because 2 cars collided at high speed and you're working a patient whose life is in your hands. You would think, I imagine for some people, it's a moment to crumble, but for most people, it's a moment of like Zen, and you end up I don't want to say you end up chasing that because you don't want bad things to happen to people, but you
Right.
kind of hope
Yeah.
you're there when it happens
Yeah.
because you're so focused. This is the only thing in that moment
Everything else falls
that
away.
matters. Everything else is gone.
Yep.
You're just like, I have this one task in front of me. I'm in a coordinated team. We're all working together. We all understand what we're doing together. It's meaningful. The impact we could have could save somebody's life. So you have that experience. And then afterward, you can reflect on, you're like, wow, that's crazy. Like I kind of can't believe I put myself in a position where I'm the person responsible and accountable for making sure the right things happen for this person.
Totally resonates. I totally get what you're saying. And I think people refer to that as flow states.
Yes.
Right? And that's where you are in a situation that is requires extreme focus, and it is generally like a little bit above like your capability level, right? Like you could really fuck this up.
Oh yeah.
If you don't focus, right? But it isn't so far above your capability level that you fall apart and can't focus, right? So you get into that flow state because you need to do just this thing right now and everything else falls away. And I would say being a paramedic probably brings that more frequently than being a case officer at CIA, although there are plenty of experiences across a career at CIA, particularly in the director of operations, that I think brings that flow state. And it is addictive. Combining with that, though, I would say, like I studied philosophy in university and had a real interest in Asian philosophy, in particular Zen Buddhism and Taoism. And I think that actually impacted, to a large degree, the way I conducted operations, right? Like and there's another guy I'm thinking of, he was in Nirvana. Remember the guy who like was the bassist or whatever, and he like left, joined the special forces.
Yes.
And then he becomes like a monk.
Jason Everman.
Yeah, he becomes like a monk at some point, right? Or somebody gets into meditation and Eastern philosophy.
It just takes like the wildest
Am I making
path.
this shit up? I don't know.
No. That's as much as I understand about it.
Yeah.
I've seen a talk he gave. And for those who don't know, he was the original bassist or guitarist in Nirvana.
Yeah.
Was there for start of the rise. Like it wasn't when they were just like a garage band. They were on their way up. And he left the band to join the army.
Yeah.
Which you're thinking, who makes that decision? And I've seen him talk about it. And one of the things he kind of points out is Nirvana was part of the counterculture, and that was becoming culturally relevant. And he was so punk rock. And he was like, well, let me do the counterculture to the counterculture, and joins the military. And there was more to his reasoning than that, but I think that's a big sort of thing that he points out. And goes on to become a special forces operator, boots on the ground in Afghanistan, goes and learns about Eastern philosophy. And I don't know that he became like a,
maybe I'm taking it too far. Maybe he wasn't a monk, but he did.
Maybe did time as a monk.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just like a wild guy, but probably similar to like you, where it sounded like early on in your story, some of the motivation was, this sounds like a very interesting life. Like these are interesting experiences, and that's what I'm interested in. Sometimes the people I talk to, a lot have done military service or public service. A lot of different ways that people get into there. You know, some have said like, hey man, I wanted to see the world. Some were like, hey, I was through and through, like I just wanted to serve. A lot of different things. I'm sure part of you is still like, I wanted to serve and serve my country and all that, but I want to have some interesting experiences to be as interesting as this guy. That's a great motivator too.
To be honest, the greater motivation was the adventure. I am motivated to a degree by patriotism. I love my country.
Of course.
I love our republic, but it was the desire for really like extreme experiences and adventure that was the principal motivation. So on the Zen thing though, I think it's very relevant in the life of a case officer. It was for me. Others have other philosophies that they draw on, or theologies even. But for me, you know, when you're sitting with somebody and you need to be absorbing like eye twitches and finger movements and tone of voice.
You're psychoanalyzing me this whole time we're talking.
Totally. Oh, wow. I have quite a readout for your colleagues when we get done with this thing. Yeah.
We'll stop the recording before that happens.
I need to take some notes when we get done with it. No, not at all. But like you need to be, assessing, is this person telling me the truth? Like, is this because this is going to go back to Washington, this report, and that this is incredibly important and we have to get this right, right? That requires an almost Zen-like, not almost, a Zen-like focus. I need to be completely here with you, focusing on you and what we're talking about. And I cannot be thinking about the errands I have to run tonight or the things I have to do tomorrow. By the same token, spotting surveillance. And if you're out and moving to go do an operational act and you need to determine, wait, is anybody following me? You need to be in a very Zen-like state, right? You need to catch that there was somebody who was looking back at you, that they now have appeared again as you're moving across the city, and you need to be able to absorb that, right? And if your mind is scattered or on a bunch of different things, or even if your mind is focused on the actual operational act later on, right, you could miss things and it could be deadly.
To lose that situational awareness.
Yeah, but it's a Zen-like focus, I think, that is absolutely essential in those moments. And it does produce flow states, right, because you're on edge. And I was only, by the way, followed once that I know of in my career. And it's a startling experience when you realize there are people now who are walking with me, right, and monitoring me.
Yeah, I'm wondering what their motivations are and how
I
far
think
they'll
we knew
go.
it was a foreign security service, and they had picked up on me and some other people that were doing something operational, and so we had to abort, right? But again, if you don't have that kind of Zen focus, you can miss the clues.
Going back to your first experience in Afghanistan, there, shout out to the Brits and all the other coalition forces.
Great accents. I mean, the accents are phenomenal.
Great accents is one of the mistakes.
I probably butchered it. There's probably some British.
I was actually really good. I was impressed. But I was going to say
I'm sure somebody's going to criticize it.
One of the mistakes we maybe made was letting go of the British accent. But hey, what can I say? Yeah. But go back to one of our earlier conversations around making friends and having allies. How about the fact that the coalition was ready to go in with us and help take down the Taliban. The fact that there were British operatives and Norwegian and Danish and French and German, like all of these countries came and helped. And again, just speaks to it's good to have friends and not operate on an island.
I think we'll see how the rest of the podcast discussion goes, but I think that could be the most important statement for me, at least.
Yeah.
Right. I think that the successes in my career, again, going back to the Jason Bourne thing, they were not just because I did something alone. The successes operationally in my career or in leading teams, in some cases rebuilding teams, that took friendships and partnerships.
Yeah.
Within CIA, across the community, at other agencies, up and down the chain of command, and then in a lot of instances with foreign partners, right? And now, recently out of government, what I get paid to do is, I mentioned I'm an advisor to several companies, but a lot of what I'm doing is helping these companies navigate environments overseas. And 26 years of making friends around the world and developing deep partnerships, well, that kind of comes back now, right? As I try to help these companies, U.S. companies, get situated or navigate or make the right connections. You can have an amazing product, but if you don't get it in front of the right person, the decision maker or whatever,
yeah, man.
Right, you're wasting time and money, right? So I help companies do that overseas, U.S. companies. And but again, I'm going back to it's friendships that make all of this stuff happen.
Yeah.
And allies are the broader definition of friendships.
I don't want to be name dropping too much here, but so we had General Petraeus on, and the investment firm that I think he's on the board of, KKR. I read a little bit of their material, and they talk about this concept of like and trust, that people do business with people that they like and trust. And that's exactly what you're, I think, pointing out there. It's not just at the business level, it's geopolitically. We work with people that we like and we trust. And I think that's an important thing for the businesses you're advising. That sounds like the lesson.
Critical
you need
piece,
to build
but
that.
if I could just jump in on that point. I was speaking to a group of CEOs a couple months ago, and somebody asked me, why would it be that foreign governments would trust you and the CIA in particular Why? Right? And what I explained in that instance is that trust, at least from my perspective, is oftentimes defined more by doing what you say you're going to do or telling people you can't do something than it is by being superficially honest all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And the CIA maintains incredible connectivity abroad, and it enjoys trust with foreign governments often, even though it is the CIA, right? But because leaders at CIA are encouraged to do what they say they're going to do and to tell foreign partners when they can't do something. And it is in contrast sometimes, and I'm not casting shade at other U.S. government agencies, right? But it is in contrast sometimes to agencies that say like, well, we'll take that on board and we'll send that back to Washington and we'll discuss that and we'll get you a response. CIA devolves power and command or to its commanders overseas and allows them to make decisions and make commitments, not autonomously.
Sure.
Right? It has to be coordinated, but gives them the ability to speak very directly and frankly with foreign partners. And so what you end up with is that foreign governments sometimes, not always, or oftentimes, end up developing significant trust with the CIA.
Makes sense. You know, when you have a problem, first person you call is the person you know who's going to answer.
And who can do something about the problem.
Right. And who can't just be like, that
who
sucks,
can produce an effect that could be beneficial to both of you. And that a lot of times they're not just looking for somebody to talk to, they want to do something. And the CIA is empowered to do things. So yeah, trust, I could not agree more. But then you get into the earlier part of our discussion where I talked about that tension between maintaining our trust and then sometimes understanding that you're going to have to do things unilaterally yourself. And sometimes I'm going to have to do things unilaterally myself. And having to weigh, do we do this thing? Could it damage the trust? And if it's important enough, we do it anyway. If it's not important enough, maybe we put a pause on it.
But it's good to know that that's like a capital that you trade in, right?
Yeah.
There's trust as like a resource that you can gather, which takes a lot more time, or you can spend, which you can do very quickly.
I think it's a principal trust, and it's principal trust in relationships abroad. It's also the principal trust back in Washington, right? Congressional oversight has to have trust that what you're briefing is in fact exactly what you did.
Yeah.
Right? Good or bad, right? And your superiors, when you're out in a station for CIA, like they have to trust that what you're telling them you're going to do is what you're going to do. And in the other cases, what happened is exactly what happened. And if you are an operative who goes to do an operational act, your superiors and colleagues, when you come back from having been there alone, have to trust that you are describing events as accurately as possible and not spinning or covering up, embellishing or any of that, because it's incredibly dangerous, right?
Yeah. So your work, not to like I hate to try to distill somebody's career down, right? Those 26 years. You started as an operative. I know you end up as an executive.
Yep.
And you start taking over team leadership. You start leading people as opposed to just being, the effect producer on the ground, right?
Yep.
And my understanding is one of the common taskings that you would kind of get is go into a team that had issues, low performance or not the intended impact, and right the ship, so to speak. Is that an accurate understanding?
You have good sources.
Maybe I have intelligent sources of my own.
I think like 4 or 5 times in the latter part of my career as a leader, I was asked to take on units, take command of units, both in DC and abroad, that had very critical missions, right? So these weren't backwater kinds of things, but very critical missions, but where morale had descended significantly, where operational effectiveness was subpar, suboptimal, and to try to rebuild those units, right, and get them back online and functioning optimally. And in each case I did that. I didn't do it alone, right? We're teams, right? Get away from the Jason Bourne myth. But yeah, that was something that in my career that I was a number of times asked to do. And I don't know if your next question is why would some units begin to fray within CIA, or is that obvious?
Well, I think that's definitely interesting. I want to hear that, and I also want to hear how you go about resolving that. Like, how do you walk into that sort of situation and figure out, okay, what's causing this, and what do we do to change it? Like, how do you right that ship?
Yeah, I think so. I think every sector has, whether it's government or private sector, has a mixed bag when it comes to leadership, right? So that some units in CIA get run into the ground is no different from some companies on the outside, or some units in the Pentagon, or some units in other areas of the U.S. government, right? So it's not a CIA specific thing. But I think one thing that may be more unique, actually probably not, right? But could be unique about CIA is that if you talk about like the skills that are needed to make you an effective operator, right? Being manipulative, right? In an operational context, right? Being extremely bold, audacious, creative, and also, as I said, at times manipulative. Those characteristics don't always lend themselves well to taking care of people and facilitating for your more junior officers and focusing on their career development and their operational success, right? So sometimes people get promoted they're very effective operationally. And I'm speaking only about the director of operations, by the way. Sometimes people get promoted and they're not actually good at taking care of people, right? And so that can cause some units to fray within CIA. So what I did, I don't know that it was rocket science, fairly simple actually, right? But the first thing you have to do is stabilize a unit, right? You have to acknowledge what has happened. You have to say it out loud, and you have to write about it to the workforce, right? You have to say, like, this is where we are at, and I welcome your feedback, right? And then you have to take the feedback and listen and show that you're listening. And you have to repeat back some of the things that you've heard so that people know that you are listening to what they're saying.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I did is always you want to stabilize the unit.
Yeah.
And you do that by first acknowledging what has happened, right? By saying, this is where we're at. We are not performing where we need to be performing, or at the level we need to be performing at. There are reasons for it. It's not necessarily your fault to the workforce. There has been, in some cases, a failure in leadership, and we're going to take a different course now, right? So the first thing is to listen, acknowledge, and speak very clearly about what has happened so that people know that you care, that you see the situation the way they see it.
You're not disconnected from reality.
Yeah, and I think you need to avoid toxic positivity. Right?
Yeah.
Like the idea is not to just come in and start cheerleading and rah, rah, rah. Now we're everything's gonna be fine
Like
now.
feel very tone deaf.
No, right. Like the thing is to say, hey, things got fucked up. Right. And it's not a reflection of your dedication, your devotion, your intellectual bandwidth and skills, right? It's just things got fucked up here in this unit. And so now we're going to chart a different course. And then you need to be fairly decisive, right? You can't wallow in the misery. You need to be clear about, like, okay, so I've heard you all. Here's some changes we're making. This is the new course. Let's go. And it needs to be decisive, right? It needs to be absolutely decisive and absolutely clear for the teams what we're doing and where we're going. right? And then you need to have mechanisms in place to get feedback as you move forward, right? Because you may need to adjust course as you're going along. One of the things I did that I think resonated in particular with millennials and Gen Z officers in particular, because they tend to be more interested in transparency than I remember being. I don't remember being focused on transparency with my leaders when I came into CIA. Like they told us to do shit.
That might be a
did
marker
shit.
of the upcoming generations for sure.
So one of the things I did at CIA when I was back in DC is I had a shadow program. So these very young junior officers would sign up, get on my calendar, and they could, on certain days, follow me through the whole day. Right. So they could go with me to brief the director or the deputy director. In some cases, they came with me to the Hill when I would testify, or to meetings with congressional staffers, or, in some cases to the White House to meet with NSC staff. So they got to see like how the sausage was being made. And they got to see how I was making decisions in certain environments. And the benefit then to them is they could talk about that amongst their colleagues at the line level. Like this is what Johnny's doing, or this is why he decided that, or by the way, he was doing these tough questions from this member of Congress, and this is how he answered. And so that information would proliferate, and it increased transparency and understanding in the units. The benefit to me, and in particular with millennials, by the way, you're a millennial, right?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
For better or worse.
I like.
I'd say for the
I like
better,
millennials,
but
and Gen Z, right? But so the benefit to me is that, like, I think when I was younger at CIA, it was a very strict hierarchy. With millennials and Gen Zers, they're not afraid to give you like direct feedback.
Oh yeah.
So like, I'd be taking some of these shadows to meetings, and then we'd go stop off and get a coffee or something like that, and they'd be like, "Hey, boss, can I tell you like about this, that meeting you had last week and how people perceived what you said and like what people were saying about that?" And I'd be like, "Well, yeah, sure. Right. Tell me." And they would just tell me. And that's the kind of thing that would never get briefed up. So understanding the perceptions of the junior most officers and how they were reading things, it's very hard to get as you work your way up higher and higher in any organization. And so if you don't have a mechanism in place where the junior most people can sometimes give you some feedback, and I'm not talking about skipping the chain of command. I'm not talking about having an open door where anybody can just pass the branch chiefs and group chiefs and whatever and come right in and see me on any given day. But I am talking about like having a mechanism in place so that you can get feedback from the line, like the people who are working the hardest sometimes, right, on the mission. Then that can be detrimental. So I had that program in place, and I found it very beneficial. I think they did too, but I found it very beneficial just to get feedback, like on the decisions I was making, on the direction, the strategy, mission successes, complications, all of that.
Well, and it wins you a lot of trust with those folks. I find, so I have a maxim in my role, leading my very small company. But I always tell people, like, ask me the hard questions. I should have answers, and you're entitled to them for the most part. That serves both ways. It's good for the people who are totally at the front line, the people in our world who are, say, cybersecurity analysts. They're looking and monitoring client environments to try to detect threats and whatnot. They don't see why it's a strategic move for our CEO to spend hours sitting across the table from people like you.
Yep.
That can be hard to connect. But I always tell them, like, hey, ask me the hard questions. We talk about this stuff as much as we can. I'm sure we could do better about creating that. But if they understand, hey, here's why that's important. Here's how it will lead to an impact on you. Here's how it helps us position ourselves and helps us grow and all this sorts of stuff. I think that wins me a lot of trust when I make clear, like, you can ask me the hard questions. I'm confident I have good answers. I'm not confident I'm always right, but I never tell them that. I said, listen, ask me how I got to this decision. I'll tell you what data points came in and what my motivations were. And hopefully that keeps your trust. But you might also see that, hey, he's totally off the mark. Yeah, but I'll at least let you know that. And I think that just wins a ton of trust where they're like, hey, he's
I
willing to be
agree
fallible.
100%. I compliment you on that. I think, one of the other pieces though is, so you're saying like explaining to people how you made your decisions and
Yeah,
letting them see that, right? That's great. Um, I would add to that though, something I said earlier, which is being decisive. Like you still have to make those
that I'm working on.
decisions. Oh, really?
I mean, so one of the things I struggle with, and I was going to ask you about this, going from operator to leader, my track in my world is like a IT operator. I'm a hands-on keyboard guy. I'm a problem solver. My like the main driver of my rise in IT has been I'm a guy who quickly could be thrown into any problem,
Yeah.
and I could figure out something. I didn't always have the right answer right away. I just always, it's like, cool, I'll throw myself at this until the sun comes up tomorrow morning if I have to figure it out. So I'm comfortable there. And that's the world I'm like hands on keyboard, comfortable there. Leadership and building a team and driving a culture and trying to be strategic has proven hard for me. It's hard for me to get up to the 30,000 foot view because from my vantage point, if I see operators doing something, I'm like, they didn't position themselves just right. I can't help myself but fly down
Yep.
and be like, hey, you guys should have posted up over here behind this cover instead of this one. They're generally probably fine where they're at, but I can't, I really struggle to let it go. And I really struggle to understand how I can effectively lead a company, letting go of so much control and just like being the ideas and coordinating guy.
It's a great topic. One, you show significant self-awareness. Right?
Yeah. No,
and a lot of leaders don't have that
Sure.
self-awareness, which can be very damaging. So good on you for that. I think there's a number of things you have to balance, right? Which is that leadership is ultimately about setting the conditions for the success of others, right? You've already been promoted to a leader, so your success is already spoken for to a degree throughout the various points of your career. But being an actual leader is setting the conditions for success for others. So there has to be a devolving of tactical decisions to others. Like they have to get out there and do the thing, and they have to make mistakes, and they have to grow, right? And you can be there to guide them, but you can't be there to make all the tactical decisions. The strategic decisions, the vision for the company or for an operational component of CIA has to be set by the leader, right? So like you're responsible for that.
Yeah.
And so I would generally devolve as much as I could to more junior leaders and officers for tactical things, but I set the vision, right? And of course, my vision had to be coordinated with people above me too, right? But then, on the point about being decisive, I think you need to be maximally inclusive, like get all the viewpoints, get it on the table, but then you are stuck with making that strategic decision.
Yeah.
And you're also stuck with displeasing some people. Like that's inevitable.
Yeah.
As a leader. And actually, I think like from my time as an executive at CIA, one of the least pleasurable things was shutting down programs or saying no. And there are some leaders in any organization that just never want to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Right?
that's hard.
And it can be very detrimental, specifically in operations. I tried to be decisive, but then open up, some discussion so people could understand how I made my decisions. And sometimes I got negative feedback on those decisions from certain quarters, right? But you can't always go back and retool it just to please that particular contingent.
Yeah.
The best you can do is explain it. This is what my calculation was. This is why I decided. I did take all your input, and now we're going this direction.
We talk sometimes at our company. It's not a unique phrase at our company. It's borrowed from elsewhere, but we talk about a concept of disagree and commit as a way we have to be able to move forward.
That's great.
We're not always going to agree, and we're going to acknowledge you don't agree, but I need you to commit to the direction we're going in. Part of the challenge for me with the decisive thing is I can be fairly in the moment decisive. Give me the information, give me the viewpoints. Cool. I think we should do this. But I'm a data collector. Mm-hmm. I like to find data to inform my decisions. I like to find lots of it. I like to dive deep into things and get knowledgeable on topics. And that means I constantly might shift us. And I imagine I've gotten this feedback a little bit, but I imagine for people in our organization, sometimes it can feel a little bit like I'm waving the ship around because I am constantly in a feedback loop. I'll make the decision, but I get very quickly back to, was that correct? What new data do we have? Can we shift? And so people might feel it's a little unstable because sometimes I shift the ground underneath them. We're like, I thought we made the decision to go here. And I said, we did with the data we had at the time, but now I think there's a better decision. I know it's a balance you have to walk. You don't want to stay on sort of a sunk cost and only move in one direction.
Yeah.
But you also don't want people showing up on Monday the following week, hey, we're reinventing ourselves again. Eventually they're like, come on, we have to pick a lane here and stay in it. And I struggle with that a little bit.
That's tremendous self-awareness though. Like, you know what you have to struggle with. And I think your point about these things being things that you have to balance, which is essentially what I said as well earlier, like that's right on the money. Right? Like,
hopefully for some of my people, they watch this and there's a catharsis to be like, he knows.
Yeah,
he knows how bad he is.
He knows he pissed us off. Yeah. No, but I think like that comes with leadership. There's no way you can get around that. Right? Like, you have to make strategic decisions for the company. And it's interesting now because now I'm no longer an executive. Now I advise executives, CEOs and executive teams in companies, right? And I give my input, but I'm responsible for no strategic decisions. It's kind of a relief. It's kind of fun. But I find myself very sympathetic to what these executive teams have to contend with. And so they ultimately are responsible for the business decisions and personnel decisions and all of that. And I am not. Whereas just a couple of months ago, I was responsible for those kinds of things. So I have like reference points to share when I discuss these things. But overall, like, I'm just very sympathetic. Leadership is tough.
Yeah. As they say, and this is going to sound very grandiose, they say heavy is the crown.
Yeah.
Right. That's great to be able to say when
I never got to a crown, but yeah.
Me either.
But I think that the greatest reward, Andy, though, like, so coming out of an operational background, no longer being able to go out and do operations, right? The greatest reward as a leader is when you see one of your junior officers succeed beyond their imagination, right? They take a risk, they plan really well, they take a risk and they succeed. And you know that you helped facilitate. You didn't do it and you shouldn't take credit for it, but you helped facilitate it. And that is a very gratifying feeling for a leader.
Yeah.
And it balances out all of the other things that I think can be really difficult, right? And can be incredibly stressful.
It's definitely, and it's a journey, right? And I'm in like an acceptance state of, for a while, I never saw myself as like a natural leader. And maybe it was just like a young man, you kind of look to men who are strong leaders and you're kind of like, I don't have what they have. You think it's just a natural born talent.
Yep.
I've come to figure out over probably the last decade or so, like, oh, okay, these are skills. You can learn this. You can find mentors who can tell you, oh, I was terrible at that too.
Yep.
And here's what I read and here's what I did and here's how I thought about it and here's how I had to change. I'm finding out, okay, you can learn to be a leader. Same way there was a time I probably couldn't have this conversation. Mm-hmm. I do public speaking. That used to like make me super anxious. I found out, okay, there are skills to this and there's ways that you can get better at it, which, hey, when you're better at things, you get more confidence and it like feeds itself, right? So I'm figuring all that out about you kind of have to be purposeful.
That's awesome. That's great. One of the coolest things that I did at CIA, which is also uncomfortable, is 360 feedback. Have you heard about that? Have you ever done that? You basically email a form to like 40 people, right? Or some given number, right? And there are people that work below you, above you, around you, in other components that interact with your component. And there's a series of questions like, how do you think Jonny is as a leader? How do you think Jonny does with decision-making? Do you think Johnny's empathetic? Do you think, whatever? And it's this list of questions, and then people do it anonymously, and then they send it back, and then a counselor comes over and reads the report to you, right? And the first time I did it, I was in charge of a unit that was like, I don't know, roughly 110 people. And I get the report, and it's like, Johnny's like super laid back, and he's really nice guy and I love working for him. And he always like boosts my ego and energy and blah, blah. And then there's like 5 or 6 people who are like, he's like an elitist. He calls on the same people in meetings. He gives assignments to the same people, his favorite people. And I realized that I had some work to do, right? Because there was this blind spot. Like there were certain types of people that I wasn't engaging enough. And it just gives you perspective on your leadership that, there's always going to be somebody complaining.
Yeah.
Right. So if you get a perfect score, then like, I don't know if that's that useful. Right. But like, you do want to take seriously the detractors or the people who are not happy with the way things are running. And you want to think about how can I address things for those people, not change my personality, not change everything just for them.
Yeah.
But really, how do I address that? And you don't get to see your blind spots unless you get that kind of feedback.
And you also mentioned something earlier. There are people who are you're not going to be able to make happy. And, I don't know where it comes from in me, but I don't like the idea that there's people that don't like me.
Yeah.
I know at this point there's some people that don't like me.
Yeah.
Right. Whether they're competitors, former employees, whatever the case, maybe current employees, I hope not, but it is what it is. Right. And
I like you for the record.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But that's sort of hard. And part of the territory of trying, being a leader is making decisions where, okay, this is going to make me disliked in certain things or to certain people, and just being comfortable being uncomfortable, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's great. It's that is part of the essence of leadership, right? And we do it because of the gratification that comes with helping other people succeed or landing big contracts and seeing your company grow, scale, all of that.
Yeah.
Seeing new products come out of R&D, whatever. Right? There's thrills that come with leadership, but there's also a lot of painful stuff. And I think when you're talking about leadership, particularly with young leaders, like we need to be clear about that. Like this is not going to be an easy path.
Yeah. It's a lot of art, not a lot of science.
Circling back to the beginning of our discussion, it's like climbing that mountain. Or like this is going to suck at points, right? Yeah. You're going to fucking hate it some days.
You're going to question, why am I on this mountain?
Yeah. But then you see the sunrise. Then you see like you look down on the clouds and you realize like, this is why I did this. Yeah. It was worth it. My leadership is worth it.
To draw this to a close, I do want to ask, when people have had careers like you've had where you go from this operator on the ground to executive to leadership and having worked for people in high stakes environments, having had people work for you, I'm sure you've gotten lots of perspectives. If I could distill into some sound bites, like what is it that makes a good leader?
Oh, I thought you were going to, sorry. I thought you were going to ask
If there's another question you were going to ask me.
No, I thought you were going to, I thought you were going to ask me like what makes a good operator, but
hey, how about that too?
Or operative? No, your first one is a great one because I think it's probably going to have more general appeal, right? I think a strong leader has to have equal parts empathy and equal parts decisiveness, right? And I think that when you are too empathetic, and there's nothing wrong with empathy in extreme doses, right? It's a good thing. But when you're too empathetic as a leader, or as you referenced, like trying to please everybody, it can be very detrimental to the unit or the company, right? So you have to combine it with a decisiveness. If you're too decisive to the point of being ruthless and you don't really give a shit about like how it impacts the people who are working around you, that speaks for itself. That's also extremely detrimental. So I think a good leader has equal parts empathy and decisiveness. And, not trying to crib off of Jocko Willink, but, ownership is critical.
Yeah.
And in government, because government, by its very nature, it's using other people's money, right? It's other people's tax dollars, right? So if I run a program into the ground at the cost of tens of millions of dollars, like
doesn't impact you materially.
It wasn't my money, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, it's everybody's money, right? So I think ownership, standing up and saying, you know what, like we just fucked that up. And briefing your superiors, or in some instances telling Congress like, hey, this did not go well. And I was at the helm. I am responsible for this. right?
That creates a lot of trust when someone's willing to
so
do
I'm
that.
adding ownership, which has already been written about and talked about by Jocko Willink and
Leif Babin, I think.
Leif Babin,
I've read that.
His other
It's a good
teammate.
book.
Yeah, it's a great book, right? But I think that's critical for leaders, and I think it can be more challenging in the government than in the private sector. At least from what I'm a neophyte in the private sector, right?
Yeah, 5 months.
5 months, right?
But these things resonate. I think any group of people, the same dynamics exist in every industry, every organization. It's human beings.
Yeah.
No matter who they are, what they do. I've seen it in all the different things that I've worked in, all the different environments, all the same dynamics, all the same personalities. Yeah. Once you know how to operate in that space, you can do it anywhere.
Well, I agree with you. And I think you talked earlier about like the kind of personalities that are drawn to CIA, right? Well, the key thing to remember is, yes, there's some unique personalities that are drawn to CIA, and there's some characteristics that make for more successful people at CIA, but they're still people. And so what you and I have encountered in our different spheres is still the same human nature.
Yeah.
And it's still about people. And the leadership, like we could talk for a whole segment just on leadership, right? And I guarantee your observations are similar to mine. Experiences are similar. They're different environments, but we're treading the same land, and we're essentially dealing with human nature, right? Which is static.
Yeah, unchanged for a long time.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to crack the code on.
No, not you and me.
Yeah. Maybe down the road. I don't know. Maybe with AI.
I was going to say with AI, maybe we'll crack that.
But you asked about operatives, and I would say what makes. Well, you didn't ask. I thought you were going to ask, and so
I
proposed, and now you're asking. Got
exactly.
it, right? So I think that what I looked for in junior case officers and people in the operational fields and tracks at CIA is a combination of passion and curiosity. And I think because the job is so demanding, you're going to need to be passionate about it. Like if you're just there to get a paycheck or because it sounds cool to think that you're in the CIA, like that's not going to be enough, right? You're going to have real passion for this mission that's going to get you through the stressors and time away from home and all of that, right? But curiosity is also essential, right? If you're deeply passionate about the mission, but you don't really care what I think and what Andy thinks or what a foreign interlocutor thinks or what his or her culture means or how that influences their thinking. If you're not curious about their culture, their family, their thinking, their experiences, and you're just passionate, that doesn't play out very well, right? And at the same time, if you're just curious but not very passionate, I mean, that can lead to sort of dilettantism.
Yeah.
Just think about how everybody feels and whatever. Right. So I think a good, healthy combination of passion and curiosity lends itself or leads to success in the field.
You did a pretty solid British voice earlier. Can you do a Ted Lasso? Have you seen that scene from Ted Lasso where he says, "Be curious"?
Sorry, is that my phone's going off? I gotta.
No, we're not going to do the Ted Lasso.
I think somebody's calling me today.
But it's a great scene. He makes this great point about being curious, And
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know, so I wouldn't have been able to imitate it because I don't know it.
It's a great.
Like I said, somebody who's listening is British, and they're gonna have none of my accent.
I'll make sure the comment gets to you.
Yeah.
What they think of it.
My 16-year-old son, by the way, having lived around the world, he is phenomenal at accents.
He's had the real world examples
he can literally sit at a dinner table and switch into Arab accent and Persian accent and Indian accent and British accent and so forth. It's great.
Interesting. I'm sure he's set up, compared to peers, that sort of world experience, I think is probably pretty invaluable, right? Just to have seen so much of the rest of the world.
I think, I have two sons, my wife and I do, and the elder is 20 and he's studying Arabic at university and international relations, and younger still in high school. But what they gave up, which is stability, right, and living in the same place for years and having the same friends, they gain on the flip side with just, I think, tremendous experiences. And I actually asked them soon after I retired, like, do you think it was worth it, guys? And they both said yes. And that was incredibly gratifying.
I was going to
for
say,
me
it's got to
because
feel good.
Yeah, because we had to pick them up and move them around like every 2 years, 3 years. And
Which I'm sure is frustrating in the moment.
Yeah.
And I moved once as a kid and I hated it.
Yeah.
And I've met kids who were like, hey, I've moved like 6, 7 times military brat and all that. And, you know, I can imagine it being a struggle. But yeah, gratifying that at the end of it, they're, you know,
I think it was worth it. Yeah.
Well, Jonny, we have a tradition on the Watchers. The last point of conversation is in optimism. Because we talk about a lot of challenging topics. Sometimes people are recounting stories of being shot at and difficult things that they've seen and done. I tend to find most people that I talk to are optimists in nature, and it's kind of why they do what they do. But I always like to end on a note of asking where that optimism comes from, where you find optimism as you look forward into your new 5-month viewpoint of the rest of the world. That's
a beautiful question, but I want to ask you, just to be clear, are we talking about the CIA, the United States?
Just you in general.
My life?
Yeah. Your philosophical approach to,
Yeah, what gives me optimism is people. So if we put it at CIA, you have some of the most dedicated, hardworking people in the country, right, who are employed there and who are working around the clock on all of our behalf, right, standing the watch, doing the hard things.
The Watchers, as we call them.
Yeah. So those people give me optimism, and in particular, the young officers that are coming in up until the point where I left, right, where I was around them. These are incredibly talented, bright people, right? I think then extending out to my life in the private sector and life as an everyday civilian, quote unquote, now, it goes again back to the people, the kind of people that I work with, the kind of people I'm around. I think at this point in my life, I've concluded that most people are pretty good people and seeking the same kind of things, security for their families and basic level of success and well-being. And most people you can trust and most people you can work with, not everybody, but people give me optimism. Right. So
it's a beautiful answer to a
beautiful question.
I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Well, I don't have anything else to add or to say other than thank you for coming on, and it's been a pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun. It's a great discussion. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Watchers. For more great content, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our channel. We'll see you on the next one.